The first stage is not beauty. The first stage is safety. Before light, roots, or visitors can return, the decay has to be stopped. Platforms rise around the tower. Old steel is cleaned. Rusted supports are inspected and strengthened. The sea is always working against this structure. Salt, wind, moisture, and time slowly taking the metal apart layer by layer. That is why restoration does not begin with beautiful details. It begins with the foundation. What is still holding? What can be saved? Where does the structure need reinforcement? And which dangerous elements must be replaced? The fort still looks severe, and that is right. In this restoration, we are not turning red sands into a glossy resort. We are preserving its silhouette, its metal, its weight, and its traces of time. The goal is not to erase the past. The goal is to keep this structure from disappearing completely. And as new railings, walkways, and work platforms appear, the tower begins to feel less like a dead object and more like a place that could be returned to people. Now we move inside. This is the old control room. It does not need to become a luxury interior. Its character comes from industry. Metal remains metal. The windows stay simple. The sea beyond the glass remains part of the room. But inside, everything has to become safe and readable. Workers clear the floor, remove the dirt, and bring the panels and equipment back into order. The old elements are not thrown away, they become exhibits. In a room like this, it is important to keep the feeling of a real place. Not too clean, not too new, not like a movie set. The traces of service, time, and isolation should remain. The room turns into the first chapter of a future museum, a place where visitors could feel how people once worked here, above the water, far from shore, surrounded by wind, metal, and isolation. The next room tells another story of red sands. After the war, sea forts like these became connected with offshore broadcasting and pirate radio. So this space is reimagined as a radio and communication room. Not an exact copy of the past, a memory room. The floor is cleared. Old panels remain. Technical details become part of the exhibition. Here, the room should not become too modern. If everything old is removed, the character disappears. If only decay remains, the space stays dead. So the restoration finds the middle ground. Preserve the old texture, but allow people to enter safely and understand what happened here. Slowly, light appears. The equipment becomes readable again. The room stops being a dark ruin and becomes a space where the past can be seen and heard. Here, several layers of history meet: war, engineering, radio, abandonment, and preservation. This is no longer just a restored interior. It is a story inside the tower. Now the scale changes. We move into the larger interior hall. At first, it is simply a damaged space. A dirty floor, broken walls, dangerous edges, and the heavy atmosphere of abandonment. But this is where the fort could become public. Workers clear the passage. The walls become brighter. Railings return. The route becomes understandable again. In a place like this, it is not enough to make it beautiful. The visitor needs to understand why they are here. They should not only see old walls, but move through the history of the complex. From defense to abandonment, from pirate radio to preservation, from dangerous ruin to open sea route. This is not a shopping center, and it is not an amusement attraction. It could become an exhibition hall above the sea, inside the old steel frame. Here, the story could be told through light, sound, photographs, and preserved fragments of the fort itself. Good restoration does not make everything new. It helps us read what was already there. Outside, one of the most important stages begins, restoring the connection between the towers. Without bridges, Red Sands remains a group of separate, rusting structures. Each tower feels cut off from the next. But when the walkway returns, the whole complex begins to work as one route. Old metal is repaired, new railings appear, the path becomes safer. Now a visitor would not only look at the fort from a boat, they could move through it, from tower to tower, from military history to radio history, from rust to interpretation. The bridges change the meaning of the entire place. They turn isolated towers into a sequence of scenes. Each tower becomes a chapter. Each crossing becomes a pause above the water. Each view of the sea reminds you where this museum really is. In the evening, when the lights turn on, the tower no longer feels lost. It becomes a landmark at sea again. Now we enter the generator room. This is the technical heart of the fort. A space like this should not simply be cleaned and turned into an empty hall. The machines have to remain. They show that the fort was not just a tower above the water. It was an autonomous world with its own energy, its own logic, and its own rhythm of life. Workers clean the floor. The metal is brought back into order. The old equipment remains as the main visual anchor. Here, it is especially important to preserve the industrial weight. Pipes, machine bodies, old surfaces and traces of use are not waste. They are the language of the space. Slowly, warm light appears, and the generator room becomes a museum exhibit, a place where the machinery itself tells the story of the structure. Not with words, but with form, weight, metal, and silence. At the top, the restoration reaches the roof. Here, the main exhibit is no longer technology. The main exhibit is the sea itself. The platform is repaired. Dangerous sections are closed. Railings are strengthened. Navigation lights appear. From here, you can feel the true scale of red sands. The distance from shore, the wind, the open water, the isolation. This is where the viewer understands why the object works so powerfully on screen. It does not stand near the sea, it stands inside the sea. These towers were not built for beauty, but time has made them one of Britain's most unusual silhouettes. And if they are preserved carefully, they could become not a monument to decay, but a place where the past remains visible. At night, the fort changes again. Light returns to the windows. The bridges glow above the water. The towers are still severe, weathered, and marked by time. But now, they are no longer silent. This is what Red Sands could become. Not a false copy, not a glossy fantasy, but a living museum at sea. A place where history can be seen, heard, and walked through. If this ruin could be reborn, what abandoned place should we restore next?